Hello, puppies and kittens. I am talking with Hans Olo, and he is a Satanist activist who arranged this cool thing on the National Day of Prayer a few months ago, where he had me up for. He had us give an invocation at the Idaho State Capitol in Boise, and I thought that was an interesting event, surrounded by all of these Christians trying to make as much noise as they could so that no one could hear us in a venue that allows machine guns but doesn't allow microphones, which I thought was funny.
Yep.
So Hans,
what's weird too is like every Capitol building across the United States has different rules. So, I mean, some of them you can go into with a megaphone, but
yeah. So Hans, you've got us going to another event, a kind of a similar event, I think, in Olympia, Washington. Would you tell us about that one?
So my partner happened to be trolling on Facebook and Twitter one day and found out that Sean Feucht, or Feucht, or however you want to pronounce it, he can get Feucht in my opinion, but Rowan found out that he was doing a cross the United States Capitol tour, where he's going to be worshiping in the capitals that let him perform inside of the capitals, and outside the capitals where he's not allowed to perform inside the capitals. So usually has a pretty big following. His last concert that he did here in Boise, Idaho, had like 2,500 people show up. So we originally tried to take the dates out from underneath him because he hadn't filed for the permits, and there was kind of a struggle here in Boise because everything was in the air waiting to see if we were going to get the approval or not. But we ended up not getting the approval, so we're working out to rent the park across the street from him while he's doing his Capitol performance. And then in Olympia, Washington, our friends see, so with capitals having different rules and regulations for reservations, the Capitol in Olympia actually has 3 or 4 different spots that you can reserve. So Sean has reserved the Capitol steps and also the main park to the right. Our friends at House of Heretics were able to book the Veterans Memorial. So we are going to be having a concert and basically a stand-up to Christian nationalism event in Olympia, Washington on July 28th.
Yeah, on the notion of it being a concert, I tried tentatively to ask if anybody knew any punk or metal bands in Western Washington area, but nobody had any contact info for anyone like that.
We've got a couple that are showing some interest. So one of them is actually a pretty badass punk rock band. So we're getting excited about that.
Very good.
But really, what we're wanting to accomplish is to get communities to stand up to Christian nationalism, because at this point, like this event, it isn't satanic. It's an event for anybody who wants to stand up against bigotry, racism, xenophobia, transphobia, and all the phobias that this guy proclaims is what we're going to be standing up against. So we're welcoming any group, as long as, you know what I mean, they're not chuds, they're not racists or anything like that. If they want to come and stand up to Christian nationalists, I mean, we'll even let some Christian groups come in if they wanted to, that want to stand up against Christian nationalism, because believe it or not, there are some out there. But we've reached a point in society now to where we're being out organized by these people, because these people will associate with anybody that will get them to their goal. So, I mean, here in Boise, Idaho, we have Christian nationalist groups that cohort with Proud Boys. They cohort with Atomwaffen neo-Nazi militia. They actually have the Redoubt under control in North Idaho to be able to dictate the laws that people in Idaho live under. And they've taken over school boards. They've taken over library boards. They've taken over local politics, commissioner spots, anything that they can. And they make it very clear that they want us living underneath a Christian theocracy. And I myself, I can't abide. The dude can't abide. I have to. I
can't think of anything that more un-American.
It's atrocious. The things that we're seeing come through our state house and bills just here in Idaho alone is it's something I never thought I would see. Like growing up, I always thought we were progressing, we were going somewhere, and now we seem to be reverting. And the
Yeah.
reason Washington is so important, and I got a hold of my friends in Washington to do this, is because Washington too is part of the redoubt, and Oregon is as well. I mean, anybody could Google Greater Idaho and see that they are actually voting in counties in Oregon to secede from Oregon and become part of Idaho. And they've been working on this plan since the time of Ruby Ridge and the Aryan Nations compounds in North Idaho. Like, they are purposely having Christian nationalists, racists, anybody that identifies with their ideology, they're having them move up to North Idaho, Spokane, eastern parts of Oregon, and they are taking over whatever they can politically, and they want to create a Christian state. And yeah, I can't.
So this was supposed to be the great melting pot. When I grew up in a more patriotic time, I think people were bragging about everything that made America great, and one of the things that they bragged about was that we had a higher standard of living than anywhere else in the world, which we can no longer boast, and that we wouldn't, the United States would not negotiate with terrorists, and nor would we torture prisoners, and we've broken both of those as well. And that we were supposed to be a meritocracy, wherein, we had here freedom of religion, where you come from a caste system back in India, but that caste system doesn't exist here. Mm-hmm. So it just doesn't apply. Everybody gets an equal shot, and this country has gone against all of that. And the one that bothers me the most right now is how people say that if you advocate for somebody else's rights, not your own. If you're all about me, well, then you're fine. But if you advocate for somebody else, if you say, well, what about all of us, or what about this marginalized group? They could use a helping hand. Mm-hmm. Now it's woke, and woke is bad because helping other people is bad. Yeah. I'm not sure how that's bad necessarily, but somebody gave me a definition of evil recently that I hadn't heard before. But the definition of evil was partly it was being selfish and greedy, and so that would imply that the Christian nationalists definitely selfish and greedy. They don't want anybody else to have any rights. Mm-hmm. They don't want anybody else to. They just want to have more privilege than everybody else. They want to be in a privileged position over everyone else, and they want everyone else to be second-class citizens.
Yep.
It's hard for me to understand how we got here as a nation with this movement that is so, I think, obviously evil, but that somehow isn't even apparent to many. I can't understand it, honestly.
I can only explain what happens in my area. I mean, I could rant on your stream for hours about the connections between organizers of the Charlottesville protests that left people dead, the Unite the Right rally. I mean, I could draw dots from organizers from that moving to North Idaho and creating fake online media outlets. And there's actually a really good, I guess it would be a podcast, the Freedom from Religion Foundation podcast a few weeks back had a special about Idaho being the forefront of the Christian nationalist assault on citizens. And North Idaho, I mean, it's crazy at this point. They have like literal Nazis running school boards, and these people, and there's a guy in Moscow, Idaho. He's a preacher, and he declared Moscow, Idaho a Christian town, and they'll chase out people that aren't Christian. You know what I mean? And his idea of the perfect society, he even says it in an interview, is a society where everybody lives under Christian rule. And they're like, well, is there a place in society for gays? And he's like, no, there isn't a place in our society for gays. There isn't a place in society for transgender people. There isn't a place in society for anybody who isn't white and Christian. And that's,
yeah.
So, I mean, I can't tell you how we got here as a country. I think, you know what I mean? The era of politics as it is, it's everybody calling each other rhinos or fake Republicans and expelling the moderates. There is no moderate anymore. There is no middle ground. What people find is just extreme polar opposites, and nobody can talk to each other and figure out a way forward. And that was my main point that I was trying to say earlier too, is that the Nazis and the Christian nationalists, they've figured this out. Like they will work with each other as long as they can obtain their goal. But yet we're sitting back arguing with each other about veganism or climate change, and we tear ourselves apart. And what I'd really like to see is, organizations coming out to Olympia, Washington, and joining us to stand up to it and tell them that this isn't just your land. And just like the song says, this land is your land, this land is my land. Like it's all of our land. And if we want to be technical, this land isn't even our land. We raped, pillaged, and murdered a whole entire culture, many different cultures, in order to take this land. And it keeps getting worse day and day. It just, yeah. Like I said, I'll rant forever if you let me.
So one of the things that impresses me is how, like, the Constitution Party will vote against the Constitution, and they say verbally that they're all about defending the Constitution, but they only seem to be interested in the Second Amendment, and not so much the First, not for any provision of the First. And not so much for a lot of the rest of it either.
Yeah. I think some of these people actually don't even know the rest of it. They don't know the rest of the amendments. You remember that guy when we were doing the National Day of Prayer? He came up behind Rowan while Rowan was speaking, and I told him, I said, well, we're exercising our First Amendment right. And he says, what, you have a gun on you? And I said, no, that is not the First Amendment. Like, you're over here telling us that we can't be doing this, but yet you don't even understand your rights as an American citizen, or my rights. Just like I don't have the right to go out and stifle Nazis from marching down the sides of the street, they don't have the right to come out and stifle me from saying what I have to say. And if they do, then that's when being a political activist turns into being a terrorist, a domestic terrorist, right? Like when you show up to drag shows and you start assaulting people because you don't agree with somebody else's expression in art, you are a terrorist. And
you just reminded me that it's not just the Second Amendment. These Christian nationalists are aware of at least two amendments in the Constitution that they will actually uphold, because they're clearly very interested in the Fifth.
Correct.
They plead for the Fifth constantly.
Yep. So yeah,
but I've had to point out to people how the previous administration had systematically attacked every single provision of the First Amendment, from, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That's one. Prohibiting the free exercise of religion. That's two. For the freedom of the press and to gather, to address grievances and all of that. And I'm already getting them out of order. But I mean, every one of these provisions was attacked by something Trump tried to push.
For sure, sending Border Patrol agents into Portland and Seattle to arrest and kidnap protesters without any due cause or process. Yeah. And then he wants to talk about how he's unfairly treated. I think it's funny now how the duality is coming out, right? Like they're like, oh, well, the criminal justice system is broken. There's no equal application under the law. It's like, we've been dealing with this forever. What are you talking about? Like, I have friends that are doing 20 plus years in prison because they got caught with a powder. So to tell me that, you know what I mean, Trump shouldn't be prosecuted because he's breaking the law, I say arrest them all. If Biden's breaking the law, arrest his ass too.
Indeed.
If they're not serving the people that they are being paid to serve, then they shouldn't be there in the first place.
Is it worth mentioning that that Biden could have pardoned his own son, but didn't?
Oh, I was telling my partner a while back, I think he's throwing his kid under the bus just so we can still go after Trump. Because if he got his kid to walk, then everybody be like, oh, where's Trump's walk?
Some things are bigger than this bond between his son. You're just going to have to eat this one.
For sure. and even then, right? Like if I evaded my taxes and got caught with a gun charge, they'd take away my rights to own a gun. They'd throw me in jail for quite an extended period of time. It's always been that way with our justice system. If you got money, you can pay for lawyers, and those lawyers can get you off. But if you're under the median poverty line, then you're going to get a public pretender, and that public pretender is going to get up there and he's going to plea bargain every single time. Plea bargain, just plead guilty. Okay, Trump, just plead guilty. You know what I mean? It's obvious you're going to, I don't know. It's not obvious he's going to suffer consequences, because I don't believe that there is consequences for people with money. So
yeah, well, we've already established that if it was you or I, we would have already been locked away over a year ago, and nobody, we wouldn't have made the news. We wouldn't have had any special deals. We certainly wouldn't be basking in our, our multi-room estate resort,
Nope.
and we wouldn't be able to flit around to other parts of the world while we escape all
There was
consequences.
there was a Facebook group here in Boise that was very popular like 10 years ago, and it was called Ada County's Mugshot of the Day. And these people, like just, internet trolls, would go on to the arrest reports and take like the goofiest looking picture out of the arrest reports. So like Halloween, you know what I mean? People getting arrested in costume and stuff. But every single day it was them picking a member of our community, which isn't that big. You know what I mean? At that time, it was maybe only 90,000 people in this town. It's grown to about 600,000 now, and like over 1 million in the entire valley. But people knew each other. Like that was your cousin they were posting the picture, and they would drag every single person off of that mugshot. And here I am watching Trump get arrested, and this dude doesn't even have to take a mugshot. Like I want to see him looking all haggard after a night in a holding cell with his hair all cockeyed to one side and bags under his eyes. But no, they're gonna be like, oh well, everybody knows his face. Well, cool, everybody knows everybody's face somewhere,
Indeed. So we were talking earlier about how this is not specifically a satanic event. And at one point we were talking about, that there would be Satanists involved, and they wouldn't, and those that were involved were not necessarily the Satanic Temple, nor are they Church of Satan. So it's not TST or COS, and I'm not sure about the other groups that may or may not be involved, or even really who's actually hosting it.
So I mean, Satanism is becoming a spectrum at this point. There isn't just one organization. I mean, every city is popping up with its own satanic groups. Some of them different. They follow different philosophies and stuff like that. But the group that is putting this on that we contacted, that's House of Heretics, and they have houseofheretics.org. You can find out information on them. But they are an open satanic community that allows anybody that isn't a bigot or a chud. So we're working with.
I have to say what I found appealing about TST was their 7 tenets. It's hard for me to argue against that. I'm completely down with the 7 tenets. You say that others have different philosophies. All I've ever seen is that one group might be a little bit more Ayn Randian, at least with its founding membership, and so I'm not so much about that. But I'm willing to work with people from different groups. If we have a common goal, we have a common enemy.
For sure. So we have House of Heretics. They're going to be there. Satanic Idaho is taking part in this. So is members of Queer Satanic, and pretty much any mutual aid groups. There's some mutual aid groups joining us, stuff like that. We're still hammering out the details on all the groups that are going to be there, but we welcome anybody, even Church of Satan members, TST members. If you want to stand up in your community against Christian nationalism, because that's what this guy is doing. He is coming into your homes and your community, and he is telling you that what he believes should be what you live under in your own community. And I've seen Seattle burn shit down for less. and I really like to see the entire community come out and stand with us and tell them, like, no, this isn't. I mean, like, sure, you might be welcome here because you have the right to be here, but that doesn't mean that you have the right to dictate to other people.
So have you yet had any communication from any Christian activist groups who are interested in taking part of this? The reason I ask is because when I was in Boston for SatanCon 2, there were Christian allies out on the street. There were hundreds of Christian protesters who, when we were inside doing our thing and there wasn't anybody on the street to argue with, they were turning their bullhorns against each other. The Catholics on one corner, the Protestants on the other, and just yelling hate speech back and forth. And there was a third group of I want to say moderates, but I really don't know who they were. They were just calling out the hypocrisy of the Christian protesters. So they were there to advocate for our rights, again, under the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. So these are the Christians that I also defend as a Satanist for their rights. Well, I'm defending those other people's rights too. It's just they don't understand that it's a two-way street.
For sure.
They're not interested in my rights. They've made that very clear.
So I'm not positive on if there's any Christian groups that have signed on in Olympia. I know that here in Boise, we can always count on the MCCU Church, the Metropolitan Christian Church. We can always count on some of we even have some Mennonite friends that show up believe it or not. That's quite amazing. We'll find ourselves after an event at a Mennonite church in the basement, all talking about how we're going to organize the next event and everything else. So it's kind of weird for Satanists to be in a Mennonite church. But I mean,
the difference in these ideologies, what we're talking about, if ideology is the right word, I mean, it seems to me that you have these people on the Christian national side, very, very selfish, all about me. What about my rights?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have this other side, which I guess is being spray painted with wokeism or whatever, where it's like it's instead of being me, it's us, and what about their rights and their rights and their rights?
Mm-hmm.
And somehow that's being villainized.
Yep.
And you try to imagine a group, the Christians love nothing more than to be persecuted. They love to pretend that they undergo all this persecution, but they've never seen their demographic represented on their parents' news channel as being baby-eating cannibal pedophiles.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And I've certainly seen that. I've seen that from a number of different demographics, not just being a Satanist, not just being an atheist, but in a news world where the word leftist cannot be said without the adjective radical being put in front of it, because there always has to be. It has to be radical left. There's no other. There's no other type, right?
One.
Yeah, and so what a lot of what I hear is people complaining about the left, and then the specific gripe that they have is actually something that Beto said or that Biden said, or they're like, those people are not on the left.
No, not at all.
So everything is not the binary dichotomy that you imagine it to be. The specific things, the specific bills, for example, that you're talking about, like one that was a gun control bill that people were complaining that it came from leftists. I'm like, no, that was a Trump thing. That one was.
Yeah.
And then this other statement, well, no, this came from a liberal, not a leftist. Believe it or not, there's a difference. Yep. And so on. So maybe can you find me a leftist? Find one of these things you want to complain about, and show me the legislation, the bill that's being presented, and show me who presented it. Let's see, are they on the left? Funny how they can't come up with one that is.
Yep. I always test the waters around here in Idaho too. I put them to the challenge, because I actually protest with a sidearm. I've actually protested outside of a hate church that was threatening to murder us on their live stream. I came back with my long arms, and I protested that day. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, why does this leftist have a gun? It's like, you're not paying attention. A leftist is totally different from a liberal.
The phrase is, you go far enough left, you get your guns back.
For sure. When you're standing down 2,000 people that all have assault rifles that say that they want to murder you, all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I guess I should probably get an assault rifle.
Yeah, I got in trouble for bringing this to where people had machine guns.
Yeah. How did that happen?
I don't, somehow or other, that they considered my knife to be frightening, and so I was told to put it away immediately.
Where was
but
this
for whatever reason, I guess guns don't scare people.
Where was this at?
This was in Arizona, of all places.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, in a place that always had open carry. So I was very confused.
Yep. That's
but this event is being held on private property, and we can arbitrarily decide that certain people scare us more than others.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
My son got kicked out of a place a month or two ago. We went in together, and the owner saw his knife as he walked in, and immediately came up to us and told him that he had to take the knife and go hide it in the vehicle because it was scaring people and he was getting complaints. But we had just walked in the door, and the owner was literally the only person who was capable of seeing the knife at that moment. And my son was outraged that the owner of the place would tell him this lie, that other people were complaining. It's one thing, he says, the proprietor has the right to tell me that he's not going to allow me to bring the knife in here. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with the fact that he lied about it. And I'm completely there.
That's it.
That seems to be another issue that we have. As atheists, we kind of get pissed off when people lie to us. There's this thing called honesty, and the Christian right doesn't have it, like at all.
No, not at all. we see that a lot around here too. Is the doctoring of photos and videos and stuff like that. I mean, in North Idaho there was a drag event at a Pride celebration last year, and they tried to say that this drag queen flashed their genitals at these kids. And the drag queen had actually just, did like the typical like spin and then squat down, stand up thing that every drag queen does. And they just threw like a blur on it, like an edited blur on their groin section. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, flash their genitals. And this video circulated. And by the time it caused enough outrage and panic within the pearl clutchers in North Idaho, they all actually believe that genitals. So people are trying to share the unedited, undoctored footage, and people are just like, "Oh no, that's edited." It's like you're contrarian at this point. You're just making up beliefs to fit your ideas.
And that's another thing I noticed about this this division between the hard right and the supposed, what everybody else that isn't on the hard right, and therefore even if you're slightly on the right but not much on the right, well then you're a radical leftist. One of the complaints is that we were supposed to be the snowflakes, was what I heard, but the people who are accusing us of that are the ones that I recognized when I was a kid, are the ones that are always offended at every damn thing.
Yep.
Right? They fall apart at anything they can find to be morally outraged about.
Yep.
Oh, your hair is touching your collar, or it's over your ears, or I don't like you. Yeah, I got kicked out. I was sent home from school for wearing a Farrah Fawcett T-shirt in 1977 because that was somehow offensive.
Yeah,
it's just But these are people who fall apart at moral outrage about anything just arbitrarily, as long as unless it's something that agrees with them.
We can speak from experience. Once you wave a crucifix dildo in someone's face, all of a sudden you'll find out who the real snowflakes are. For some reason, that's the most offensive thing anyone can say or do. Yeah, we just offer them to feel the power of Christ in them, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, the country's on fire.
All right, so let's not spend too much time on this. Like, if you have any promotional or if any other ideas that you want to convey about this upcoming event, let people know about it, and I'll try to shut up a little bit.
So I just say look up houseofheretics.org. Figure out how you can get involved. We're still looking for some bands if anybody wants to be in it. Atheist groups, because we got a lot of atheists, of course, watching R and Raw. So if any atheist groups in the Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia area want to come and join in with us, more than welcome.
Yeah, I did get a short list of names for some interesting people, but I didn't get any contact info.
Yeah, that's the way it is. Bandcamp, we'll just start hitting people up on Bandcamp. There has to be somebody that wants to tell Sean Feucht, whatever his name is, go fuck himself on a microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
okay, so I will put links below for anything that you want me to include or that should be included. I'll be happy to put it down there. Just provide for me what it is.
Okay. And of course, there's also the Boise, Idaho event too. If people want to come, so 2 days later, after July 28th, we have July 30th here in Boise. We're going to be putting on an event right across from Sean Feucht while he's performing and everything. And Idaho is a different experience, right? Because the police won't do what they do in Washington, which is going to be separate the two groups with like chain link fence and stuff. Here in Idaho, it's the Wild West. So one could sit there right across the street from him while he's performing. When they pray, you could sit there and talk a gang of shit to him if you wanted to. As long as you don't curse in front of women and children, it's not considered disturbing the peace. So that's mainly what I like to do too. Like National Day of Prayer this year, I just went down there and trolled people the entire time.
So in summary, this thing that's going on the 28th in Olympia, this is a guy that's going to be giving a concert. He represents the moral majority, I guess, even though wasn't he helping Lauren Boebert cheat on her husband?
That's what the rumor is. Yes, he also he ran for Senate in California.
He claimed he converted 98 Satanists.
Oh yeah, he claimed he converted 98 Satanists at SatanCon.
Oh yeah, I'd like to see that list of no names that he can't provide.
Yeah, this guy, he showed up to an event that we did at the Capitol. It was one of our first events that we ever did. It was an unveiling day invocation that we gave in the Capitol building. and he showed up with a camera and all of his prayer worshipers and tried to say that he had chased us out of the Capitol with prayer because he filmed us leaving the Capitol. But our event was over. Like we came, we did what we were supposed to do, and then we left. So here's this guy.
At some point you gotta go.
Yeah. So here's this guy posting on Facebook, oh, we chased the Satanists away with prayer. So it's like ever since then, fuck this guy.
As if. I mean, I realize these people believe crazy horseshit anyway, but it gets a little ridiculous when all these people, for example, I get into arguments online all the time, social media and whatever. But when all they can do is lie, when it gets to the point where you have to wonder, am I speaking to a drunken 11-year-old? They have no accountability. There's nothing that they will hold to. They just are spitting venom and idiocy. And so at some point you're like, okay, I'm not going to bother with this person anymore because there's no kind of coherency there. I'm arguing with a barking dog.
Exactly.
They will then brag that they won me, or that they think getting blocked is a victory dance, I guess.
They think you went away, so the Holy Ghost came into you and had you deactivated.
Yeah, so you couldn't score a single point. You couldn't make a point. You couldn't understand a point. And so, fine, I just turned your volume down, and that means you won. And that I ran away.
Yep.
Idiocy.
It's gotten to the point where when we encounter them, because we have a protest every other week that we do here outside of a hate church, and lately we have a lot of trolls coming up and engaging us because we've been doing it for like a year. We basically go to church every other Sunday. That's what we call it when we wake up to go protest this assholes. We're going to church. But there's people that show up and they try to explain to us, well, Jesus loves you. Like, why are you doing this? It's like, because you're not paying attention. Like, these people are saying they want to murder us. Where's your God telling them to fuck off? And I'm to the point I don't even want to talk to them anymore. Like, there's protesters out there like, oh, we can try to change their mind. It's like, you ain't fucking changing a thing.
And in the same breath, these hate pastors are using them in their sermons about how they're shitty Christians. Like,
Rowan, why are you a voice off?
I'm not. I have thoughts. I have many thoughts. Like one point I wanted to.
But by the way, I just want to say you two are among my favorite activists ever.
Yay!
I just want to make that a public statement.
Opinions vary.
What, like one point I wanted to make too is like you guys were talking about how a lot of atheist activists, etc., are thinking about the rights of other people, right? And even with an action like this, like ultimately it ends up defending Christians too, because like if I were a Christian, I wouldn't want another Christian going into a legislative body and saying, this is what Christianity entails. This is my version. This is my perspective. And that's that. Because you have thousands of different denominations that have different interpretations. Like even with that hate preacher that we protest, I'm constantly writing Bible verses on the sidewalk outside of his church, and he's like, well, you're just twisting that. And it's like, no, it's literally what your Bible says. I didn't write it. Like, I don't know why you're mad at me about it.
So I uploaded a video yesterday where I pointed out that if you ignore verses 16 and 17 and just read 18 through 20, well, now it seems to say something different, doesn't it? But that's an out of context quotation. And so I was criticized for the same thing, because I made reference to another passage from another place that was also being misrepresented. I'm only calling the fact that it's also being misrepresented in the same way. That's not my out of context quotation, but they have to project everything so that everything they accuse you of is something they're in fact doing already.
And like, even in regards to this particular church is so anti-Semitic and homophobic, and they will just go on rants and rants about, and I won't even use the specific slurs, like they'll straight up use the slurs, and they have explicitly stated they want the government to enact biblical law. Well, what is biblical law in this case? Stoning us to death.
Millstones around the neck and thrown in the water.
And it's like, and I tried telling him, I was like, you're being disingenuous by taking a book that was written thousands of years ago, that had hundreds of different laws at the time that may have made sense culturally. Like, it may have made sense culturally to not like wear fabrics of mixed fibers for whatever reason. I can't claim the specific reasons, but what I mean though is like it was thousands of years ago. It's done. Like, we don't have to go by that particular standard. There is no health or safety reason to avoid like polyester. And you know what I mean?
Or two
like,
different.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
there are other reasons to avoid polyester.
and it's disingenuous because there are so many interpretations of the verses that they try to use against queer people and like turn them into like, well, it means specifically adults with adults. And it's like, actually, there are some interpretations that talk about how it's maybe talking about other things. And like, even at the end of the day, I'm not in your fucking book club. Like, I'm not in your book club, bro. Like, I'm not in your book. I did not sign up for this. Like, if you want to do that and talk about the Bible until you're blue in the face and decide you don't want to have sex with the same gender, cool. Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Shut the fuck up and move on.
Like, that's great. But like, you don't have the right to legislate that on everyone else. And what's even more like, in my opinion, devastating is it ends up erasing like the sacredness of their own religion by like trying to force everyone to be this, right? Like, if you
the Christians like to brag that they spread Christianity through love and it looks like blood of the sword and legislation largely.
Yeah. It looks like force, and it's like, how can you force people to love a God and it be genuine? Like, it's never going to be genuine. So why do you want that from people? Like, it should be coming from a place of like care and community, not like condemnation. And not only that, but like these people, these Christians, especially this one dude, his name is Joe Jones. I'm putting it out there. We do protest him. Hemant has written some stuff about him too, and like Sure Foundation. And he's a prime example of like how these thoughts and beliefs trickle into legislators, trickle into our local governments, trickle into the state, and then go into national. Like, the talking points that this Joe Jones does is like the same as when I'm listening to like the Daily Wire or whatever.
Incels. He sounds like an incel.
Except someone like Ben Shapiro will go right up to the fence, right? They'll go right up to that fence and then they'll back away a little bit. But this Jones dude, he'll cross it over and be like, freedom of religion, baby. Try me. And it's like, fuck you. Like, how about that? Like, go fuck yourself. Freedom of religion, exactly. As I'm drawing this fucking pentagram on your chalk, as on your sidewalk.
See, like I was saying before, like we've gotten to the point now, like we're a year and a half into protesting this guy, and we've gotten to the point to where when these people show up and try to explain to us about God's love, I don't want to fucking hear it. Like, I'm not here to debate you. I don't want to find middle ground with you. I just want you to move the fuck on. And if you don't, I'm going to offend you so deeply that you're going to want to leave. Or we have one Karen that comes back and chalks our sidewalks before we chalk them because I pissed her off so bad. I asked her if she believed animals have spirits, souls. And she said, yes, I do. And I said, why aren't we inundated in dinosaur ghosts right now then? And she just kind of like blinked at me like blankly for a second. Like, why isn't every pet that every person has ever owned wandering the streets that died some horrific death? You know.
And
the ecological answer for that, and this was the one that I sadly believed when I believed in spirits and that sort of thing. I thought that living life force was animating physical bodies. I bought into vitalism, but that's okay. Everybody in my family held on to some 400 or 500 year old outdated science. That's how I was raised. And so I believed that when something dies, then its body becomes ashes to ashes, dust to dust, but its animating spirit would reintegrate into the biosphere of living spiritual energy, and that some of that would be reincarnated, but not always, not as a unit. So when you die, it's like if your spirit is, you have a cup and it's full of you, and then you pour it back into the ocean, and then you can scoop it right back up again immediately, but you're not going to get all of you. Doesn't matter how quickly you get it. You're not going to get all of you. You're not going to get pure you. So you're going to get mixed in with a bunch of other, bacteria and insects and a bunch of other things too. And so this is why we have such a polluted memory that we can barely recount our past lives. This is what I used to believe growing up in the hippie days of Los Angeles, man.
Well, I hope not. I've had enough of this place.
But like,
it would be a different body, it'd be a different experience every time, but and you would be reincarnated as maybe a bunch of different things at once. I mean, I certainly wouldn't be reincarnated as a single bug. I would come back as a bunch of mold and fungus and various different things. But this was a belief system that I had once upon a time. Like I said, growing up in Los Angeles in the 1970s, when it was all hippie spiritualism and that sort of thing. I'm kind of embarrassed that I had that belief, but that was the ecological answer, was that anything that is alive would therefore have this life force in it, and that when it died, it all went back into the biosphere, and so you become one with everything in the Buddhist tradition. And so it seemed to make sense. There was a lot of things. In my generation at that time in that place, there was a lot of people leaning that way toward Buddhism and toward Taoism and that sort of thing.
At least you didn't end up a Scientologist.
Well, that would have been a long way away from where I was. Yeah. So if I had read the Tao Te Ching before seeing Star Wars, I would have declared myself to be a Taoist. But as it happened, of course, I saw Star Wars first, and so with my literal, sincere religion for a long time was Jedi.
I could go on a rant about that. I could feel Hans going like
I was looking at Rose
like Jedi are evil. Anyways, okay, that's all I have to say. Like they're a cult. But like on the Chalk Karen thing too, I wanted to make a point with like the people that tend to approach us at the protests we do. Sometimes they're just curious and they're like, well, why are you protesting this church? And then you have some other people who are like, well, you're just protesting Christianity. And it's like, no, you're not paying attention. You really aren't, because I don't have enough time to protest every church that's just homophobic, right? Like it would have to be quite a long list, especially in Idaho. And this pastor literally, I told her, I was like, I know you must feel big and brave and like you're actually doing something because you're confronting the heathens who happen to be standing on the sidewalk, like completely exposed. Like you can just walk right up to us and harass us and ask us why we don't believe in God and all of that. But you won't walk in that church, will you? You won't walk in that church and confront your own fellow Christian and say, why are you saying these horrible things? Why do you have a sign outside of your church that says no dogs allowed with a rainbow flag? Yeah, really cute shit. And she was like, oh, well, I will. So apparently she did. And this dude literally just rips her apart and is like, I almost dislike her worse than the Satanist out there, because at least the Satanist out there is honest about who she is and what she stands for. But these Christians that preach love and tolerance for everybody, they're worse than them. And it's like, I want like, and so I say that to stress like the event in Washington. If you're a Christian and against Christian nationalism, show up. Speak out.
Let's once again cover what's going to be going on in Olympia. So we've got there's the Capitol grounds, which doesn't necessarily mean the Capitol, but we're talking about like the big front yard for the Capitol, like the park or whatever.
There's a garden to like the east side of the Capitol building that House of Heretics has reserved, which will be
Veterans Memorial.
Yeah, which will be next, which will be basically surrounded by Sean Feucht people who are there to attend that. And the idea is to perform gender affirmation rituals, which I did in February in the state of Idaho at our Capitol building. And then unbaptisms as well. So for folks who want to have a ritual that like symbolizes separating themselves from like religious trauma, that's a good option. There will be some speakers, like obviously you, obviously Hans, myself, And we're obviously trying to get music. We're really just trying to like show like, yeah, let us worship. Like, you call this your let us worship tour, fine, then let us all worship. We're all going to be worshiping together. And my worship,
Well, not so much me.
my idea of worship is the upholding the values of wisdom, justice, and compassion, right? Like,
for me, it's like I detest when people just come up and they assert baseless speculation as if that's a matter of fact. How do they not understand that when you make up your own statistics and call it truth, there's a word for that. We call it lying.
right?
And so I always get irritated when you pretend to know things that you can't know, that no one even can know. That's lying. That's dishonest. That's what got me thrown out of church when I was 11. Preacher said something that I realized that, hey, there's no way he could know that. He's saying he knows this thing. He can't know that. He's lying. Honestly, I was thrown out of church at 11 for calling out the pastor for lying.
Yeah.
And that's always been my issue with religion.
Yeah. And like what has been said earlier, this isn't strictly a satanic event. It might be being held by a satanic organization, but ultimately this is for people who value compassion, justice, and wisdom, and want to have their voices be heard against Christian nationalism, including Christians. Like, Christians should speak out against it too, because these people are going to consume your religion, use it as a tool, and then wipe their butt with it and move on to the next thing if they feel like it. Like, whatever will give these people power is what they worship.
I keep hearing about moderates. Where are these moderates at? Let's see these moderates.
Yeah,
come out. And
I remember in 1993, I think it was, when I was watching 700 Club, because I sometimes I would watch 700 Club just to get pissed off. And I remember when I heard Pat Robertson say something along the lines of that we should go out and kill homosexuals where we find them, because the United States has these terrible earthquakes that cost billions of dollars in damage, not because our property is costing billions of dollars, but because the United States is the only country that allows homosexuals to live, and that in order to prevent earthquakes, we should kill homosexuals. That was the gist of his argument.
And yeah,
I go to a Christian group, and I call them out for having supported this, because they're all claiming to be moderates, right? They don't support this guy, right? Well, you just make donations to your church, which then in turn funds that you're all indirectly funding this organization. And this guy said that, and there's only one Christian in that group that remembered him saying that could even come to my defense, because back then nobody was saving all of these. It was 1993. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't. If he had said something like that just before he died, that would have been all over everywhere. But you could get away with it. So, and people would challenge me that if we didn't keep a record of it, then he didn't say it. Well, he also said in 1982 that the world would be torn in half by the alignment, the planetary alignment. He said that all the gravity of all these planets on this side with the sun on this side was going to split the earth in half. He said that. And people just pushed that off because that wasn't hate speech. That was just stupidity. Well, everything he says is stupidity, but a lot of it is also hate speech, and you have to take that shit seriously.
And I know that you have an international audience, so I also want to stress that this isn't just a US issue. It's moving globally. Africa is a big example too, where these Christian nationalists have poured so much money over there that they're influencing governments in Africa and Europe even to come up with this heinous, specifically Africa, this heinous LGBTQ focused legislation attacking them. It's not going to stop here.
I have to say, I'm one of those rare people that is straight up heterosexual, what you would call cisgendered male, always been comfortable in my own skin. So it's hard for me to relate sometimes to people who experience gender dysphoria or all of that, but I don't have to understand it. I don't have to validate. I don't have to verify that this is a real thing that they're experiencing. It's enough that they say that they're experiencing this. I can take them at their word. for that. Where a lot of other people demand that I provide scientific proof that transsexuality is a thing. Well, are they experiencing it? I'm not, so I can't speak to that, and I don't. It's not my topic. But I'm going to take them at their word, and maybe we all could.
Yeah.
Another problem that I have with some of these other
anybody with compassion and empathy too. I mean, I'm the same way. I'm a cisgendered white male, semi-heterosexual relationship, but it's not my place to question it or try to rationalize it. It's my place to be an ally. It's my place to be in between these poor people and the people trying to hurt them. Because that's really what's going on at this point, is that there are people out there that are wanting to hurt our friends, our neighbors, my kid. My kid identifies as non-binary. And if I ask these Christian nationalists when I'm at these events and shit around the Capitol, what would you do if I walked right into this crowd right now and assaulted your kid? And I always get the same answer. There'll be a problem. Well, guess what? I identify as a fucking problem at this point. Like, you're assaulting my kid. I identify as a problem now.
And I live in a state where they are passing legislation to target certain of its citizenry based on whether they identify as trans, or on a number of other issues. I mean, my state is just fucked up in a lot of different ways.
So that's why I did a gender affirmation ritual in our Capitol building in February, because they were in the process of passing a bill against minors receiving gender-affirming healthcare, which in their mind, the scope was surgery, hormone replacement therapy, and even blockers. And honestly, the way that it was worded was even things like counseling services and stuff like that like affirm your gender could be seen as felony child abuse. And keep in mind, Idaho is a state where 200 children have died since 1979 due to faith healing exemptions. So like Timmy gets sick with pneumonia, but I don't want Timmy to have antibiotics. I think God is going to cure Timmy. I'm going to pray over.
So to the very same people who think it is an outrage to raise the minimum age to own certain high-powered rifles, for example, that to raise that minimum age to 21, which should be fair because it's 21 is the age for so many other things, right? It's considered an outrage to raise that, but here in Texas and in Florida, they want to raise the age by the time that you can get your gender affirmation medication, whatever I just said, what I meant to say. I hope everybody understands. I know I didn't say it right. You have to be 26.
See,
when did you have to be 26 to make any adult decision? But they're going to make special provision for that one because they want to be especially cruel to that one, while also just saying, "Oh no, you can't have, you can't be, you can't, you have to be 17. You can be 17."
And what's especially heinous with that is they claim that they're using science. Like, oh, well, the brain isn't fully developed until 26, whatever. It's like, you surely don't give a fuck about science in any other realm.
Well, if we use that argument, then you shouldn't be able to indoctrinate children until they're 26.
Exactly.
Wait until somebody has a fully developed brain and then tell them about how a magic snake talked the first woman into eating an enchanted fruit.
Yep. And your creepy ass purity ring bullshit too.
And like, as somebody that identifies as non-binary, I personally don't medically transition. I don't feel the need to at this point. I've had a child that has had gender affirming care, and the way that these people twist things is it's blatantly disingenuous, but it's also like, it's heinous, right? Like, they're doing it on purpose. And it's, as a Satanist, I've seen this before, right? With like things like the satanic panic, where you're using this idea of, well, we're just trying to protect the children. Why are you against protecting the children? What, are you against children? Do you want to kill children? And it's like, no, you're the one trying to go from this place of like, emotionality because children, like, and I care about children deeply, which is why I'm against you using them like this, like, and actually harming children in the process. Like,
Yeah, these people who accuse us of being groomers while also protecting child marriage legislation.
while their churches get insurance for fucking their pastors touching kids, right? Like, there's literally
That's an insurance program. Somebody offers that.
Yes, they offer an insurance now to protect clergy from sexual assault. Well, not from the charges, but from like being sued about it and stuff like that. Yeah, it's disgusting.
There was a
truly
Supreme Court
disgusting.
ruling just recently that the Mormon Church doesn't actually have to tell anybody when somebody admits to child abuse or sexual abuse in the confession.
I think we brought up how religion all wants special privileges.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, you can, as a religious institution, get a special insurance just in case your clergy feels the need to sexually abuse children. So
yes, sign up for Mutual Omaha's kitty diddler program.
like it writes itself, right? Like, you guys are creating your own issue and you refuse to clean your own house. So instead you're going to demonize people that look weird. Like, that's like, I feel like that's what it comes down to.
If you bring up child marriage laws, they'll defend statutory rape too, while calling you a pedophile and a groomer. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, somehow it's shut up. Every Democrat is what happened?
Lost my camera feed right there. That was weird.
Yep. Yeah, somehow you dropped off screen for a moment. I don't know why, but I'm told that like Tom Hanks and everybody in Hollywood is somehow this devil worshipping cannibalistic pedophile. But they're also the ones who are defending child marriage and the kitty diddling clergy and all of that, which I'm not seeing that so much in any demographic that I identify with.
Yeah.
We're screwed.
Okay, so let's close it up. We've got this thing. Let's close this up. We've got this thing on the 28th in Olympia that's going to be on a Friday, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and we're going to be in the Veterans Memorial area where we're going to be surrounded by a bunch of Christian nationalists, essentially, who are advocating that their special privilege to take other people's rights away. And we're going to be doing what leftists always do, which is say, no, humans have human rights and should be protected. So that's evil. We're not allowed to advocate for other people's rights. We're just So yeah, contact. Well, we'll put links below. Please contact the available groups if you have a punk or metal band or something along those lines. If you have a group that would be interested in participating in this thing, let the organizers know. I'll give some information in the description. Oh, these dogs, shut up. I'm going to have to start broadcasting from the garage.
They'll weasel their way out there too.
Yeah. The parrot can definitely be heard from out there, but fortunately he's being quiet now. All right. You two, give you a minute to give a closing statement. We'll just end with that.
Okay. So yeah, come to the event in Washington on July 28th. Fuck Christian nationalism. Even if you're a Christian, you should also be against Christian nationalism. Don't let them hijack your religion. Yeah. Hail Satan. Gotta throw in the Hail Satan. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
And if you have the free time, come to the Boise one as well. 2 days later on July 30th.